I'm Brian Barnett. I'm just a regular guy. I'm not a doctor. I have no legal license in any field of psychology. But I did live a large part of my life with borderline personality disorder unknowingly. And I really did rid myself of the disorder completely and permanently. Through that, I've become an expert on issues involving emotional health. I accept no responsibility whatsoever for your feelings, thoughts, behaviors, decisions, and actions, including your decision to watch or listen to this show at all. But I do hope you might benefit yourself from the insights I share. Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome back to The Last Symptom. I'm Brian Barnett, the creator and host of The Last Symptom. Appreciate you joining me here this week. As I do every week, if you're a new time observer or listener, I want to welcome you. The show is now available not only in audio format, but it's also available as video on YouTube and Rumble. So do me a favor. Everybody's using YouTube and Rumble these days. If you're subscribed to me on some audio platform, which is great, why don't you do me a favor, run over and subscribe to The Last Symptom YouTube channel. And then by doing that, the mere act of subscribing to the YouTube channel or the Rumble channel causes the algorithm, the YouTube algorithm, to recommend the channel to more people. So I reckon it'd be like the algorithm would look at things that you're interested in, things you're listening to, and stuff like that, and then it'll go find other people who are interested in similar things that you're interested in and recommend The Last Symptom to them. And so that they'll have a greater opportunity to discover my work and to benefit from it. Today, we're going to do our announcements. I'm going to tell you a story. Oh yeah, good campfire story this week about my old buddy, Jordan Selvage. It's been a while since I've told you a story about him, and had my buddy Lambert here the other night, and of course we were telling stories, and this one come to my memory, and so I thought, well, I got to remember to share that with all you folks. I'm going to tell you about the man who fell asleep in 1921 and woke up in the year 3906. I'm going to share with you, we're going to go through a list of questions that people have sent my way on a website that I used to write for, but I don't write for no more. So I'm not going to answer their questions on that site. But what I am going to do is I'm going to take their questions and I'm going to answer them for you right here today, right here, right now. And if we have time, we'll talk about some other things. But let's start with that. Let's do the announcements. TheLastSymptom.com. That's my website full of free and paid resources. Now, before you fast forward, let me tell you something about the free resources that I offer. This one falls kind of into a free/paid resource that I offer. It's kind of both things at the same time. On our online community, the Last Symptom online community that is exclusive to the Locals platform, so you can join us there by going to thelastsymptom.locals.com. Locals is spelled Locals. That's one way to join. The other way to join is to download the really slick Locals.com app from the App Store to your telephone or your iPad or the device of your choice. And then you just search for The Last Symptom. Here's what I want to tell you about our online community. Last week, by the way, I caught a mistake that I made. I told you all that we were over 8,000 strong there on the Last Symptom community on Locals. That was a slip of the tongue. What I meant to say is we're over 800 strong. So one of these days we might be up into the 8,000s, but we ain't there yet. But we are over 800 strong. Now here's what I want to tell you about our community. I have started a tradition of doing a live stream every Monday exclusively to our community there on Locals. So I've been kind of mixing it up. I'll do it some nights I'll do it 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. That's New York time. But because a lot of our members are down in Australia and in the UK and different parts of the world, I'm trying to every once in a while do the live stream at noon on Monday. So it's either those two times, but the tradition is every Monday, unless I just simply can't get to it, I'm doing exclusive live streams only on Locals. So it's not a stream that appears on YouTube. It doesn't go to Rumble. It doesn't go anywhere. It's special and directed only to my online community there, the Last Symptom online community there on Locals. They're about an hour long too, so the live stream goes about an hour long. So if you're only used to listening to the show, you're missing out on a lot of good things there with the live stream. Let me tell you what a live stream is. Not everybody knows what a live stream is, and maybe you're one of those folks who worry about, man, do I have to be on camera? Well, like what is a live stream all about? A live stream is where I am live on camera. You know, you folks watching this right now, this is pre-recorded. Imagine if you were watching me right now live, sitting here in real time talking to you on your screen. And then you have the ability to chat, type things to me. And in real time, I can see the conversations that you folks are having, the questions directed to me, or the statements directed to me, or the things you guys want me to talk about, and I'm able to react to it and talk about it in real time. So there's a lot of benefits to that. We've been doing it now for about a month. First couple times, we were really warming up to it. But it's turned into a nice tradition. This very last live stream we did, a lot of good questions come up. We had this whole really nice conversation about being able to observe things non-judgmentally. How do you do that? What's that mean? And things like that, and real life examples of that. The reasons why it's important and stuff like that. We also talked about a bunch of other topics. It's amazing how much we can address and talk about in an hour. So it really is a nice way for you to have regular access to me, and for me to get to know you in a private setting where it's just us. It's just the Last Symptom community, not a bunch of outsiders or anything like that. It's just folks who are invested in the work that we do here. So I wanted to tell you about that. It really is a wonderful resource, and it's a reward, an intimate access to me in a way that nobody else has on a regular basis. And by joining our community there, you support my work. And if you become a financial supporter within the group, it supports my work even more. And there are benefits that come along with it. I'm really tired this week. Again, I know you guys are going to get tired of hearing me say that. I've had a lot to do. And my little girl is sick again. And I have been walking around with like crucifixes, garlic, everything. Try to keep from getting sick because I got a big backpacking trip coming up here soon. Popping vitamins left and right. Anything I can think of to not get sick between now and when I end up in the back country. All right, those are the announcements. So let's move on. There was a website that really kind of got me started with the Last Symptom. I'm kind of loath to tell you about it, but I'd say most of you already know what I'm talking about. The website is called Quora, and I hate that site. I mean, for all the good it did as far as getting my work out there and my message and stuff, and people are still discovering me through that website. It's a clown show over there, and it seems like every decision they make is the wrong decision. It is detrimental to contributors, rewards readers, punishes contributors. When I got started there, I mean, the reason why you know my name is because when I started off on Quora, they didn't give me any option. To be able to contribute there, you had to provide your real name. And there are times where I wish I could go back in time in a time machine and maybe use Rut, my other name. My name is Russell as well. And in Appalachia, my grandpa, for example, he was also a Russell. That gets shortened to Rut. So I would have liked to have gone back. I mean, if I could do it over again, I'd like people to get to know me by Rut. But here I am. Everybody knows me as Brian Barnett now, and I'm just sticking with it. But a change that Quora has made recently is that you can call yourself anything. You get on there, call yourself Pickle Nose, or I don't know what, Tomato Face, whatever name you want to come up with. And it's really a stab in the back for the people who have spoken openly about some really sensitive things, for that to be a requirement in order for them to write for that website. And now it's just a big free-for-all. You can just call yourself whatever, hide behind any names you want to. And every decision they make, I mean, every decision they've always made has always been like a spit in the face to me personally. Their team that censors you and all these things. I mean, they just really have been hard on me for all the years, for the years that I wrote for them. And then when I stopped writing for them, now, I haven't been writing for them on a regular basis now for years. And all I get from them are emails begging me to come back, begging me to monetize on their website, begging me to write more articles for them. And the lack of self-awareness for some of these tech groups, I'll tell you what, it's just mind-boggling. You just treat people like total dirt, and then wonder why they don't want to continue contributing to your site. So that's a long way of saying that every once in a while I'll go on Quora and I will check some of my old articles, maybe update them. And every once in a great while, I'm talking like once a year, there might be a question that somebody sends me that I say, well, that's worth replying to. I can sit down for an hour or so and write an answer to that. But back when I was writing those articles, I mean, I would spend 5-6 hours on a single article that I would contribute to them, and then most of them would get accepted. But you imagine spending 5-6 hours writing an article, getting it just right, checking it up and down, and then presenting it to the world after all that time investment and energy investment for the moderation team there at Quora to just delete the article or to block the article or say, no, you can't publish that. that sort of thing was happening once is too often, but it was happening too often. So anyway, here are a bunch of questions. We can just go boom, boom, boom right through these questions. There's no reason for me to spend 5-6 hours developing all the reasons why my answer is what it is, because you folks have access to my entire library of work, both at thelastsymptom.com as well as all the episodes of this show. So if I provide an answer here and you say, well, I need more context, or I need more reasons why he says that, I've already given you those reasons. They exist. They're out there. All you got to do is spend a little bit of your time and energy going through the episodes of this show or the articles over at thelastsymptom.com and do a little bit of work on your own. You'll find the answers. I've got them out there. So these are questions that have been presented to me there on that dumb site, and I'm just going to answer some of them here. How does that sound to you? Question number 1. How common is it for people with borderline personality disorder to have had narcissistic parents? Well, it's pretty darn common. Let's say it this way. Every single person who has or at one time has had borderline personality disorder or any emotional disorder, that person's parents do have an emotional disorder themselves. Now, is it narcissism in every case? No. But here's something to keep in mind. All emotional disorders have the same fundamental cause. They all have the exact same cause, and they all have the exact same solutions. The exact same underlying problem, the exact same thing that needs to be done in order to fix that problem. So you say, well, how can that be? How do people end up with different emotional disorders then? So my father, for example, I recognize that he has what is most likely narcissistic personality disorder, and I ended up with borderline personality disorder. Why? The answer is so simple it'll make your head spin. Because of individuality. What do I mean by because of individuality? What I mean is the unique personality type that is inherent to you and that you were born with. That is the only thing that separates me from having borderline personality disorder and my father from having narcissistic personality disorder. You remember what I said about emotional disorders? They all have the same fundamental cause. The same thing is at the foundation of all of them. So how does the unique individual personality type that is inherent to you, that you're born with, explain me ended up with one and you ended up with another and your parents ended up with another? Because your personality type, your natural personality type, determines your way of handling a thing. It determines your way of looking at a problem and coming up with the best ways to deal with it. So what is at the root of emotional disorders? Improper and unhealthy understanding of feelings, self, and life. As well as, and I'll just throw this in there too, a completely erroneous understanding of how worth works, of how value works. Unhealthy people aren't aware that there are two different distinct types. There's the commercial type and there's the inherent type. Problems arise when you apply the commercial type of value system to people, and unhealthy people do that. So my father lives with completely erroneous concepts, distorted ideas about feelings, the nature of feelings, not just his feelings, but mine as well, and everybody's feelings in general. He lives with a distorted concept about the nature of self. In other words, what it means to be a person. Not just for his own self, but for all selves. So when he looks out at the world, he has a distorted concept of what it means to be a person. And then life kind of covers the rest. But the one thing that I've started to include in here that I never included early on in my work is this whole thing about worth. My father lives with completely distorted and unhealthy and false notion about worth. How it works, where it's born, the nature of it. He's applying a commercial idea of value, that whole value system that applies to commercial things, to people. He applied it to me as a child when I was growing up. Now, we go back to his parents, my grandparents. They lived with the exact same false ideas and unhealthy attitudes. My father, being raised by that, he was getting those same messages. It's interesting that a teacher can't teach you anything that he can't teach you how to understand something in a way that he doesn't understand it himself. So my father in that situation with my grandparents, experiences that same inner struggle and pain, trying to figure out how to cope with these hurtful, false attitudes and notions about feelings, self, life, value, worth. And because of his personality type, he says, he's not sitting at a white erase board, like mapping this all out or anything. This is all happening unconsciously when we're children. But his personality type said, the way to handle this is this and this and this. And he ended up then with narcissistic personality disorder. And then he grew up, and he had me, and he passed on those same unhealthy attitudes and messages to me about feelings, self, life, value, how it works. And when I experienced those same conflicting, painful messages and attitudes, because of my natural personality type, the one that's just inherent to me, the one I'm born with, I said, unconsciously, the best way to handle this is such and such and such. And those are the coping strategies that I settled on, which ended up being the borderline personality disorder that we talk so much about. But it's all the same. That is the only thing that distinguishes one emotional disorder from another emotional disorder. Your inherent natural personality type that you're simply born with. I tell a story about, I got a cousin named Sherman. He come out to the house. They all come out to the house when they were kids, and we took a walk down the road, and we come to a horse out in a field. I didn't know that horse. I didn't know the farmer. I didn't know. I knew of the horse. I knew of the farmer, but had no experience with them. Did not know them personally, on a personal basis or anything like that. But we were about 10 years old, 11 years old. And I remember we got down there. My cousin Sherman's always been like this, jump first, ask questions later. He just goes. He just does it. And his personality type is like, I'll figure it out. I have no doubt in my ability to figure this out on the fly. And he'll just jump right into a thing. That's not my personality type. It's never been. I wasn't born that way. And it's interesting. I could fake it. Like I could spend a lifetime imitating my cousin Sherman. But for the rest of my life and until I died, no matter how well I imitated, it's not natural to me, is it? the best I can ever hope for is to imitate that personality type, but not actually possess it myself. My natural personality type, the one I was born with, is the one it's inherent to me. I'll have it for my whole life. And it's interesting, the same happens with dogs. If you want a good service dog, for example, do you know they can't just use any dog? They can't just use any dog as a service dog. Why not? Is it because of the failure of the trainer? Is it some reflection on the trainer's poor skills or something? No, it's that the dog is born just like you and me with an inherent natural personality type. It's just something you're born with. And that is inherent to you. And so there are some dogs, their natural inherent personality type is just not the type of personality that is ideal to make for a really fantastic service dog. Isn't that interesting? So that's the same thing I'm talking about here. So we get down to the field there, and my cousin Sherman sees that horse. He says, "I'm going to ride that horse." And I said, "Are you out of your mind?" It was a big horse. And here we are, only 10, 11 years old. I said, "That horse will kill you. I don't know that horse. I don't know what it'll do or anything like that. I don't know the farmer." He says, I'm going to ride it anyway. And he calls that horse over. He gets up next to the fence, and he climbs that fence and just leaps onto the horse's back. That horse takes off, trying to buck him, running like the wind. Disappears, goes running off toward the horizon. There was a hill, and then there were some trees, and it disappeared into the forest there, into those trees, over the hill, and then here comes Sherman. About 10 minutes later, walking back on foot, he got throwed by that horse. And he said, "Boy, that was great. I love that horse." And he just had the greatest time. Again, it's fascinating to me, the differences in our natural personality types. And I admire that about my cousin Sherman. There are times where I wish I had more of that personality type in me, but I simply don't. And I never will. But the reason why I tell the Sherman story is if you think about Sherman and I looking at the same problem and coming to our own conclusions about the best way to handle that problem. Is he going to come to the same conclusions I do? Not at all, is he? Why not? Because his personality type is more like, let's just jump into this. I will figure it out along the way. Right? That's his solution. That's his natural way of handling the thing. Natural way of approaching and looking at the thing. Not mine. Not mine. I'm more of let me sit here and study this for a while. I want to understand it from all sides. And then we can start talking about what to do about it. So there you go. Spent a lot of time on that first question. How common is it for people with borderline personality disorder to have had narcissistic parents? Very common. How do I know that it's very common? Because nobody who grows up to have an emotional disorder, nobody who is in that situation has parents who don't have an emotional disorder themselves. It's impossible. It's impossible. So, the odds are very, very high that one of those parents has narcissistic personality disorder. And if they don't have that, they do have another emotional disorder. So it really doesn't matter to specify that it's narcissism that they have. It's more constructive to just recognize that no matter what, if you have an emotional disorder, so do your parents. Whether you know it or not, whether they know it or not, whether any of their friends can look at them and detect it or not, they do. There's a reason why nobody can look at your parents and detect it. Either they don't know them well enough, or they're also unhealthy, in which case they wouldn't know what signs to look for anyway. They wouldn't even know what they're seeing when the signs are visible. All right, direct question number 2. Why is it so hard for people with borderline personality disorder to maintain close friendships. Here's why. They don't like themselves. In fact, they loathe themselves. Because they don't like themselves and they loathe themselves, they don't view themselves correctly, which means it's impossible for them to view other people correctly. Number 4, intimacy. They have an intimacy deficiency. They cannot experience intimacy. They can't. The best they can hope for is to mimic it in various ways. Superficial, false intimacy. So very hard to have a really healthy friendship when you hate yourself, you don't view people correctly, you don't even view friendships correctly, or the purpose for friendships correctly. It's all selfish, I hate to say, because it's all, what does it bring to my life, what does it do for me, and all these things. When you don't view other people correctly, you don't treat them correctly. When you are unable, and really, as long as a person has an emotional disorder, it's not that they're just unable. As long as the emotional disorder is there, they're incapable. So they couldn't, even if they wanted to, experience intimacy. And what is at the foundation of good, healthy friendships? Intimacy. Now, the good thing about that is that they can do the same work that I did to authentically rid myself of my emotional disorder, and then these things open up to you. So I want to be clear there. When I say that they're incapable of experiencing intimacy, I'm not saying that as people they're incapable. I'm saying that as a person with an emotional disorder, they're incapable. But you can eliminate the emotional disorder, and then things like that open up to you. What does eliminating the emotional disorder involve? It involves rejecting all of these beliefs, these distorted beliefs that have you viewing yourself and your feelings and value in a completely inappropriate and unhealthy way. Once you identify those things, address them, fix them, make adjustments to your perspectives and attitudes, then you can begin to experience genuine love for yourself. You begin to view yourself appropriately and healthily, and then you extend that to others as well. You know, our view of ourselves really is inseparably linked to how we look out and view other people as well, how we deal with them. I believe it was just on that live stream the other night, I was just saying about how the way you treat yourself is directly, inseparably linked to how you will treat others as well. The way you view yourself, perceive yourself, and the way you deal with yourself is directly and inseparably linked with how you will view and deal with other people. And I think I gave an example of if I make a big dumb mistake. If I make a big dumb mistake, and I view it as appropriate for me to be extremely critical with myself and unforgiving, guess how I'm going to look at my daughter when she makes a big dumb mistake. I view a critical attitude, really critical, unforgiving attitude, correct for my dumb mistakes that can simply be attributed to imperfection, right, and the human condition. Now she makes a big dumb mistake. Do you see how my attitude on the matter and the way I deal with myself and view as appropriate and justified? Well, then I view that as appropriate and justified also in my dealings with her. But now on the other hand, what if I make a big dumb mistake and I say to myself, Barnett, you know, perfection is unattainable. You're never going to be perfect. And this mistake you made was just due to that. It's just due to the human condition. And because you're never going to be perfect and you're always going to make mistakes, it's something you couldn't fix even if you wanted to. You really need to forgive yourself for this, not dwell on it forever, not beat yourself over the head, endlessly about it, just let it go. Just let it go. Just accept that this is part of being an imperfect person and let it go. You know? And so I do that for myself. And then 20 minutes later, my daughter makes a big dumb mistake. Well, I'm not very likely, am I, to jump down her throat and be super critical with her and unforgiving and demanding when I just let myself off the hook. I just let myself off the hook for the same thing, for making a dumb mistake that is impossible to avoid being an imperfect person. You see, inseparably linked, the way we perceive ourselves, understand the nature of being a person, the nature of feelings, the nature of life, that is inseparably linked with how we will look at and treat other people. Next question. This one's easy to answer. It says, I fell in love with someone who has shown clear signs of paranoid personality disorder. What should I do? Here's what you should do. You need to discard everything you have learned until now about love, your understanding of love and what love is. You need to recognize that it's all false and erroneous, completely based in distorted, unhealthy belief systems, and you need to start over. You need to go back to the drawing board and learn what love is, because you don't know what love is, because you're not able to fall in love with anybody, because you're unhealthy. You know how I know? Because nobody who is healthy falls in love with somebody else who has an emotional disorder. And nobody who is unhealthy or has an emotional disorder themselves is able to love. It's what did we just get done talking about? That unhealthy people are incapable of experiencing intimacy. That alone settles any argument about, yes, I can feel love. Yes, I can. No, you can't, because you can't even experience intimacy. Just that one thing is enough to prove that you don't know what love is. Love cannot exist without intimacy, without an ability to experience intimacy and to be intimate. There's more reasons than that why people with emotional disorders can't experience authentic love. But we're not going to go into them all here this week. I'll just say, already, just that one thing, intimacy, is the proof. I can offer you lots of other proof, and I have. Go to the episodes where I talk about love. There are several. There's been special episodes that I've devoted entire episodes to that discussion. So the whole question is ridiculous. I fell in love with someone who has paranoid personality disorder. Really? You think a healthy person is going to look at somebody who has an emotional disorder and say, wow, this feels right. This feels good. That's like me running into a bunch of heroin addicts down on the street corner and going, this just feels right to me. It just feels right. And here, I've never used heroin in my life. I don't want anything to do with drugs. And you're saying that makes sense? That would feel right to me? No, it wouldn't feel right to me. It'd feel the opposite of that. It'd feel like, I don't wish ill on these people, but this just the whole thing feels off, and I kind of want to get away because it's not for me. It is contradictory to everything about me in my life. The whole drug addiction thing. So you imagine a healthy person meeting with an unhealthy person. It's the same thing. We're talking about romance and falling into love and committed relationships. It doesn't feel right. A person knows within one date that it's not going to work. And I get folks every once in a while say, oh, well, he fooled me. He fooled me. No, he didn't fool you. You just didn't know what you were seeing. There's a reason why you weren't able to identify all the warning signs. Because you wouldn't know what you're looking at or seeing, even if it jumped up and bit you on the nose. Because all of that stuff seems normal to you. Why would this all seem normal to you? Because you're unhealthy too. So if you think you fell in love with somebody with an emotional disorder, it means you have an emotional disorder. What you want to do, I said that this person needs to go back to the drawing board and learn all about love. That's one thing to do. But the most important thing to do is work on yourself. Start working on yourself. Identify your own issues. Address them. Fix them. In the process of that, if you have an emotional disorder and you truly do the work to rid yourself of that emotional disorder with the help, for example, here of the last symptom, by doing that, that process naturally requires that you correct false ideas and false beliefs about what love is. You cannot get from unhealth to health without correcting false, distorted beliefs about what love is. I'll give you a hint. Love is not just a feeling. So if your argument is, no, I know what I feel, you've already lost the argument. Because love is not what you feel. What you feel is not what determines whether you're experiencing authentic love or not. All right, next question. Boy, the time's really going tonight. I'm surprised about this because when I sat down to do this, I was so tired. I said, man, how am I going to get through this? And I'm actually going to run out of time. This next question is just about as ridiculous as the one we just got done addressing. It says, how will a relationship with an untreated... This is another reason why I don't continue writing articles for Quora. Because no matter how many times I tell the audience, stop calling people by their disorder. Like, stop defining people by their disorder. Stop saying, this is a BPD. Pointing to somebody who has an emotional disorder and saying, they're a BPD. As if they were born that way. As if their disorder is inherent to them, describes them, defines their life. They have an emotional disorder. They aren't an emotional disorder. So this question does that. How will a relationship with an untreated BPD... So let me correct the question. How will a relationship with a person who has untreated borderline personality disorder and an empath work out? Terrible. You know why? Because there's no such thing as empaths. Grow up. Grow up. Stop believing that there are real life superheroes out there. Like the X-Men. All walking around with these mutant powers of empathy. It's the most absurd belief out there that some people have a special power, a special empathy power. Let me tell you about it. Empathy is a quality, again, like love. It is not just a feeling. So if your argument is, no, I am an empath because I feel things strongly, you've already lost the argument, because empathy is not just a feeling, it's a quality. And it's a quality that is a naturally occurring product of emotional health, good emotional health. That means all healthy people are empaths. All healthy people experience genuine empathy for real. Who does not experience empathy? Who cannot experience empathy? So we've talked about people who can't experience intimacy. We've talked about the class of people who cannot experience authentic love, who cannot experience authentic empathy. People with emotional disorders. And do you know who the only people are on the face of the planet who believe in such things as empaths? People with emotional disorders. They believe that their emotional disorder has granted them a superpower that, curiously, all healthy people already naturally exist with. An emotional disorder does not grant you superpowers. It doesn't grant you anything constructive and positive. Emotional disorders only are destructive. There are lots of reasons why a person would feel things very intensely. A lot of reasons. All of them unhealthy reasons. All of them unhealthy, self-serving, selfish, distorted reasons. There are no such thing as empaths. And these questions about how will relationships work out with people who have emotional disorders, the answer is terrible. What is at the root of emotional disorders? Inappropriate view of feelings, inappropriate view of self, distorted ideas about the nature of value and worth and how it all works. And you're telling me that a person with all these things going for them negatively can't experience intimacy, doesn't know what true love is, thinks it's a feeling, thinks empathy is just a feeling, doesn't view themselves right, loathes themselves, doesn't have a proper attitude towards feelings, has a completely distorted concept about life and the very fundamental nature of things, the most fundamental and important things in life. You think that person's going to go off and be able to have a healthy relationship? It's impossible. Everything we've just described that they can't do or that they view inappropriately and wrong is absolutely required for any healthy relationship. So all these questions about relationships this and relationships that and how will this work out and how will that work out, the answer's terrible. That's the answer. Terrible. It will always work out terrible because everything required for a healthy relationship starts with a healthy relationship with oneself and an accurate understanding of feelings, self, life, and value. The idea that a person who understands every one of those things incorrectly and inappropriately can go off and experience happiness. There's another thing. They can't even experience happiness alone. Think about that. The people with emotional disorders cannot it's not that they just cannot. They are incapable of experiencing true contentment by themselves. How are they going to get into a relationship and that fix the problem? So how are they going to get into a relationship? These people who can't even experience contentment by themselves, and suddenly they're going to experience contentment. It's a whole false concept about relationships, like the relationship is the answer. Like if I just get with somebody else, that'll fix the problem. I was with the wrong person. No. That is not how love works. That's not how contentment works. That's not how life works. That's not how relationships work. A relationship isn't the answer for anything. So some things to think about there. You could tell I get worked up on that subject. That's just because it's never ending. It's never ending. Unhealthy people are just obsessed with relationships. It's like life has no meaning without a relationship. There's no reason to live without a relationship. Why do you think unhealthy people believe that way? Because they hate themselves. They don't like themselves. They can't be content with themselves. So it's like, well, if I just go out and buy one more pair of shoes, then I'll be happy for the rest of my life. Folks, a pair of shoes is not going to fix the things keeping you from being happy. Purchasing things feels good for a second, doesn't it? I was just reading about, the World Series just ended, and the Astros won, and Philly lost. Dadgum. They played hard, but they lost. And I was just reading an article about how the euphoria of winning a championship really, really quickly wears off. So imagine that you're a baseball player. You've fought hard all season long. You win the World Series. How thrilling that is for about 10 minutes. Maybe a day, maybe a week. But it wears off just like that. So the article was saying how players have to adjust their attitudes so that they begin viewing the journey, the entire journey, as being the real reward. Reveling in the journey of the whole thing, rather than just the big win. Isn't that interesting? So a lot of healthy adjustments in understanding and attitude toward things have to happen for unhealthy people to get healthy. And all of these questions, they reveal such unhealthy and twisted, crazy thinking. I don't mean crazy in the literal sense. I just mean really, really off the mark thinking. And that is not a judgment for me, because remember, I was once the person with those exact same distorted thinking, and it's astonishing to me sometimes reading questions like this and realizing just how many people are like that out there who live with these same unhealthy belief systems and views and perspectives and understandings of things. It's I just shake my head that I was once that far off the mark. All right, we're really running out of time here now, so let's pick up the pace here a little bit. What are the best predictors of recovery in patients with an emotional disorder? The best predictor is this. Are they open and receptive to things I teach with the last symptom? Are they self-initiating? And are they doing it for themselves? Are they self-initiating? And are their motives healthy? In other words, are they doing it for themselves? That's the best predictor of authentic recovery in folks who have an emotional disorder. Next question. What are some of the subtle signs that someone with borderline personality disorder may be on a downward spiral? The best sign would be, are they breathing? If they're breathing, they're on a downward spiral. People with emotional disorders are always on a downward spiral. It's a lifelong downward spiral, whether they know it or not. That's the most interesting thing. Most of these things I say, persons say, that's not true, that's not true. No, it's not true consciously for you, but unconsciously it is. Is there an increase in teens exhibiting traits of emotional disorder? If so, what's the cause? The answer is yes, because we live in an increasingly unhealthy world. Why? Because people have increasingly unhealthy attitudes. What is at the root of emotional disorder? Unhealthy, distorted attitudes. So, parents pass these unhealthy attitudes and perceptions to their children. Children grow up, have their own kids, guess what they do? They pass the only thing they know on down to their children. Same unhealthy attitudes and perceptions. And then their kids grow up, and guess what happens? Around and around we go. Here's an interesting question. Why does Quora allow a person to claim to be cured from borderline personality disorder when in fact no cure exists, and tout their website for others to follow? Isn't this promoting false hope? All right, so you, the person with an emotional disorder who is not cured, says that being cured is impossible. And I, the person who once had borderline personality disorder and now have lived for years and years without it completely cured, and I know what that process required and I know what it took. I say that it is curable, because I did it. But it makes sense to you to ask why it is incurable to the person who has been cured from it. Could this question get any more absurd? No, it surely couldn't. This is a person who doesn't want to get better. People who ask me questions like this, they don't want to get better. They want to stay unhealthy, or at the very least, they want an excuse for why it's okay to stay unhealthy, or at the very least, they want an excuse for why they have not made any headway yet. And I'll tell you why. Because they've already made up their mind that they don't want to be cured, that it ain't curable, and so therefore they have nothing to do, they have no work to do. They can just sit back and be smothered in sympathy from other unhealthy people, can't they? Let's see. What limitations in life does a person have with borderline personality disorder? Well, we've already discussed that. They can't love themselves, can't love others. They have an improper view of feelings. They have a completely unhealthy and improper understanding of value, how value works for people. They can never experience intimacy, which is a human need. It's not like a cherry on top thing of life. It's a human need. And when you're deficient in a human need, it leads to all sorts of crazy things. As a person, here's the next question. As a person with an emotional disorder, how do you explain your intense feelings? Well, I don't have borderline personality disorder. I used to, and I had it for the first 35 years of my life. I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you where these intense feelings are coming from. Misperceptions. So if I look out the window and I see a woman struggling with a man, it looks to me like he's trying to steal her purse or rape her or something, and I think that woman's in danger. What are the feelings am I experiencing? Anger, a rush of adrenaline. I jump up from doing this show and I go racing outside, down to the street, ready to fight, right? This is what my feelings are doing. They're really elevated and really volatile. I'm ready to get into it. And I get down there and I see, wait a second, they're shooting a commercial. I see the television cameras. I see the director in the director's chair. I see the lighting and everything, and the guy with the microphone boom. I go, wait a second. I just about rushed onto this film set to rescue this actor because I thought she was in danger. What happens to my feelings? My feelings completely subside, don't they? That is happening all the time for people with emotional disorders, because their understanding of what it is they're seeing is completely off. They're interpreting the experience through a completely false filter, and the feelings just are what they are. They're not experiencing feelings any differently than you and me. If you and I were looking through that same filter and misunderstanding the same thing, in other words, we're viewing the thing and we're understanding it in the same way they are, the same extremely offensive or hurtful way that they are, our feelings would react the same way. So folks who have emotional disorders, their feelings are not malfunctioning. They're not acting in any way different from any other human being. That's a complete lie and a myth. So that's the answer to the question. How do you explain intense feelings? Perceptions. Misperceptions. All right, so there were a couple things I promised here. Let's cut off that. I told you I'd tell you a story about Jordan. Here's the thing about old Jordan. He was not a... Well, let me just tell the story. We had a friend, a mutual friend, older friend. This is an adult. We were kids. This happened when we were in our probably late teens. And the friend of ours was an adult, had a wife, had kids. But every once in a while, he'd hire us to do labor for him, like labor work for him, manual work. His name was Buck McSwords. And I tell people that, and they go, "You got to be kidding me." No, his name was really Buck McSwords. I was just telling my buddy Lambert, who was here helping me with some electric last weekend, and I started telling him about this Buck McSwords. Oh man, he had me laughing, talking about this guy like you're imagining like some kind of action hero or something, you know. It's got to be the coolest name of all time, Buck McSwords. Anyway, Buck had hired us. He had gotten a job to paint a house in a nearby town. It was in the middle of summer. So he asked Jordan and I if we'd like to make some extra money. We said sure. Went out there. He took us out to the house. The first thing we had to do was go in all around this house. The paint was old and kind of chipping off, and we had to take a tool and scrape as much of the old paint off the house as we could. It was 100 degrees outside. We're out there working, scraping, up on ladders, down the ladder, up the ladders, down the ladders. I mean, this was going to take days just to do the scraping. Like I said, it was about 100 degrees outside. Jordan and I get out there, and we're not 30 minutes into it. He says, "Hey, I need to go get something out at the house." He said, "Do you mind if I step away? I'll come right back." I said, "No, buddy, go on." So I kept on scraping paint. I mean, I was at it all day long. It was exhausting. Jordan takes off, and about 2.5, 3 hours go by. The whole time I'm doing this work all by myself that he's supposed to be helping me with. And I'm thinking, what is taking him so long? Now, this is before the days of cell phones, you got to remember. So it wasn't like I could just pull my cell phone out, text him, "Hey, where you at?" or anything like that. So I'm just waiting for him, and I'm working in the hot sun and everything. Man, going through the lemonade and tea, and it was a lot of work that day, a lot of hard work. Finally, he shows back up about 3 hours later. And what happened? And he come up with a story. I don't remember what he said, like he had car problems or something like that. So I just dismissed it. All right, well, let's get back into this. And so he helped me out for the rest of the day. A couple years passed after that, and I was talking to old Buck McSwords, and he says, "Hey, do you remember that house that you and Jordan helped me strip and paint?" And I said, "Yeah, I do remember that." He says, "Do you remember if Jordan was there and helped you that entire first day when you guys were stripping that house?" I thought about it, and I said, "Well, now that you mention it, he said he forgot something at home, went to pick it up, and then had car problems. He was gone for a few hours." And Buck says, "I know he was." He said, he had a grin on his face, like I don't know. This is real humorous, but I ain't sure how Brian's going to take it. But he says, "I know he did." He said, "I went out there, out by Jordan's place, and I remember Jordan lived in that barn out in the country. And actually, Buck and his family lived not too far from Jordan. So Buck said, I had gone back to my house for some. Buck would have like several projects going on at a time. So that's why we were left there by ourselves, working on that house, because he'd have like 2 or 3 different projects going on at a time. He said, I went out to the house to get some stuff for this other project I was working on. He said, and I took the back roads to get there. He said, I was back on this no-name back road. And as I'm driving the gravel dirt road, he says, as I'm driving, I see up ahead there's a car pulled off to the side of this back road out in the middle of nowhere. And he said, I pulled up next to it real slow and took a look. He said, and there was Jordan parked under a shade tree, sleeping in the driver's seat. Man, I laughed so hard. I never did bring that to Jordan's attention, by the way, while he was alive. Then I understood why Buck was smiling about that, because he knew the story. He knew what was up. Jordan just got tired of working that day. I mean, within like the first 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And so he concocted this story. I got to go pick something up at the house. And then he just drove out to one of those back roads where he thought nobody would see him, parked the car, and took like a 3-hour nap while I sat there working all day long for those 3 hours out in the hot sun on that house all by myself, simply because he didn't want to do the work. So that was what I was getting ready to say when I started to tell the story. He was not a real physical guy, Jordan. He wasn't a real physical worker or anything like that. He was more of a, well, he would be like a video gamer today and that sort of thing, you know, kind of soft work, we call it, where I'm from. You know, person who wants to sit at a computer all day, kind of like what I'm doing now. So I can't really knock it, sitting behind a computer all day. But it's not the work that I growed up doing. Yes, I know I just said growed up, but that's the way they say things around here. That's not the kind of work I grew up doing. It was all physical labor. All right, let's wind it down here. The man who fell asleep in 1921 and woke up in the year 3906. Paul Amadeus Dienach. Boy, why can't people just have normal names like Smith? Why they got to be so difficult to pronounce? Paul Amadeus Dienach. All right, that's the way I'm going to. That's what I'm going to stick with. Dienach. Spelled D-I-E-N-A-C-H. One of you out there can correct me. And the author of the article also has a real complex name. Why can't he just be Jones? No, it's Andre Tapalaga. So this is an article by Andre Tapalaga, the man who fell asleep in 1921 and woke up in the year 3906. Thought you guys might find this interesting. Dreaming of a futuristic world takes a lot of creativity and imagination, especially during the start of the 20th century, where technological innovation wasn't as present as it is today. Paul Amadeus Dienach. His book, entitled Chronicles from the Future, The Amazing Story of Paul Amadeus Dienach. They're going to make me say his name as often as possible. Based on Dienach's personal journal, was originally published in 1972 in Greek. In his journal, he had written in extreme detail about how he lived in the year 3906 when he ended up in a coma for a year. The amount of specific detail within the book has made many people think that he had actually lived in some sort of spiritual way in 3906, or a far futuristic world based on the amount of detail given. Again, 1921 wasn't all that interesting in the sense that there weren't many things to inspire writers or stimulate their imagination. The sleeping illness. I'm just going to call him Paul, because that's his first name. Paul was born in Zurich, Switzerland, in the year 1884. Since a young age, he had always dreamed of being a teacher, and that is why he had studied to become one. After finishing his studies, he became a teacher of German and French language. He was in love with a woman who broke his heart for a rich man. That dirty dog. Why would she go off and do that? After she got married, he ended up in depression, which some say had affected his health. In 1917, Paul fell ill with a disease that came as mysteriously as it left, named encephalitis lethargica, or more commonly known as the sleeping illness. There was a small epidemic around Europe with this disease that was mainly present between 1916 and 1924. Those who caught the disease were sent in a coma for spent long periods of time in a coma. I think that this article was written originally in a different language, so maybe Greek. So there are some English issues with it, but we'll get through it. In 1921, his illness worsened when he fell asleep for a good year. During this time, he was constantly monitored in a hospital in Zurich. When he woke up, he found out that his mother had passed away, and also that he had been diagnosed with tuberculosis, which he most probably caught while he was in the hospital. Once he got better, he moved to Greece where he taught French. In his class, he became good friends with a student named Georgios Papachatsis, who later on followed to become an important person within the Greek government. In 1924, he wanted to return back to Switzerland, and he gave this Papachatsis guy his own personal diary as a present. In this diary, he had written everything he had quote-unquote dreamed during his long coma. Paul's only wish was that this feller never share the information inside the diary. Do you think that man kept his promise? Well, we wouldn't be reading about this now if he had, would we? So the guy started to read the diary and translate it from French to Greek. Within the 800 pages, Paul described how during his coma, his consciousness left his body and entered the body of a person from the year 3906. Throughout the diary, Paul mentions that he is not a writer, nor a man with a lot of imagination and fine details. This book, this diary, was published in 1972. Says Paul was not an author, poet, or professional writer. Rather, he was an ordinary man who kept a journal. Never with the expectation that it would be published, and never with the wish to become famous off a book. Within the book, Paul describes how he woke up in the year 3906 in the body of a man named Andreas Northam, who was in a hospital recovering after an accident. Guess what kind of accident? The collision of what Paul describes as flying cars of the future. Andreas was amazed by the technology present in the hospital, as well as the futuristic uniforms worn by medics. Despite all this, he did not understand the language the medics spoke, neither could he remember who he actually was. What's more amazing is that Paul's consciousness was in control of Andreas' body and found out everything that had happened since 1921. Based on his acknowledgement, the biggest issues within the 20th and 21st century are world wars, lack of respect toward nature, suppression of violence, excessive consumerism destroying the planet. There were years after our present time where the political and economic world was controlled by a new global order. Violence and poverty had extended around the world. Humanity had reached a point where it had overpopulated Earth, and Mars was already colonized by thousands of people. The colony on Mars, however, only lived for 60 years because a catastrophic phenomenon killed all of them. In the year 2309, almost the whole population of Europe is extinguished by a nuclear war. The survivors start to migrate to the south of Europe, where they begin the process of repopulating the continent. At the beginning of the 24th century, a new global government is created that removes all the countries and continents and makes the whole population of Earth as part of a single nation, therefore bringing equality to humanity. Paul marked the year 2894 as a very important one, where the rebirth of a spiritual force had been witnessed between Greece and Macedonia in the Valley of Roses. This spiritual entity brought a new type of human that was very different from a physical perspective, and which brought a new lifestyle to our society, one that is simpler and which made humanity happier. In the year 3382, a man named Alex Volke brought a new meaning to the power of human consciousness through meditation. Humans unlocked the true power of their spirit and managed to do incredible things such as control the chemicals within their bodies that affected their emotions. Oh boy, I could go off on that right there. That's appropriate for Last Symptom stuff. Get that? In the year 3382, this feller says that we're going to finally be able to control what we feel. Wrong. There are plenty of other incredible things described within the book that has been acknowledged by Paul. There's another person, famous author Caroline Leavitt, who also mentioned that she had lived the life of another person while being in a coma. The article finishes off this way. Dreaming is still something that we do not know much about, as it is linked to our consciousness. There may be a lot of things that we do not know about our own potential as human beings. Well, that's a fun read and really interesting. I'm sure that the guy really did dream up all those things. I'll just finish by saying anybody who is has complete trust and faith in the Bible like I do does not believe stories like this, because we're already aware of what promises the Bible gives about the future, which have never failed to come true in the past, and which I am certain will come true in the future. But that's me. And maybe you don't believe in the Bible at all. Maybe you find this more interesting. And I thought I'd share that with you. For me, I just love stories like that. The imagination of it all, the what ifs. Those are very fascinating to me, and I wanted to share those with you. So you can take that for what it's worth. And if you want to look up that article, it's by Andrei, Andrei Tapalaga, Tapalaga, the man who fell asleep in 1921 and woke up in 3906. The article was was published January 14th, and so that's how long I've been holding on to this article to share with you folks. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a wonderful weekend. I hope to see you back here next time, same place. Take care.